On January 16th, something shifts in the unseen realm, and this is not a symbolic shift or a vague spiritual impression. It is precise, intentional, and deeply personal. This date has been marked, not by human calendars, but by records that do not forget, records that do not misfile, and records that do not lose names. What you are hearing right now is not meant for everyone. It is reaching you because a loved one, someone connected to your bloodline, your covenant, your history, has been flagged in the records. That word flag matters. It means attention has been drawn. It means a pause has been initiated. It means heaven has leaned forward and said, now. This is why the urgency surrounds this message. This is why you are being told to watch immediately. Because what is unfolding did not begin today. It hath been building quietly, patiently, and deliberately for longer than you realize. There are moments when heaven moves silently, and there are moments when it announces itself. January 16th is not a silent moment. It is a confirmation moment. And the confirmation does not come through coincidence, random emotion, or fear-driven urgency. It comes through Archangel Michael, the enforcer of divine order, the defender in times of contention, the one who steps forward when something that belongs to God's people has been delayed, disputed, or resisted. When Michael confirms a message, it is because there have been resistance somewhere, resistance to justice, resistance to restoration, resistance to release. And that is why this message involves what you're owed. Not what you wish for, not what you're hoping might happen someday, but what has already been accounted for, recorded, and assigned. This is where many people misunderstand spiritual timing. They assume delay means denial. They assume silence means absence. But the records do not work that way. The records track prayers that were whispered when no one else was listening. They log tears that fell in private. They hold sacrifices that never receive recognition. And sometimes, the trigger for release is not your most recent prayer, but an act of faith performed by a loved one. Years ago, perhaps even generations ago, that has now come up for review. When a name is flagged, it is not to investigate wrongdoing. It is to signal readiness. It is to announce that a file untouched has reached its appointed time. You may have felt a strange pressure lately, not fear, but weight. A sense that something is about to change, without knowing exactly how or when. You may have noticed old memories resurfacing, dreams becoming vivid, or conversations repeating around themes of fairness, closure, or things finally making sense. These are not random psychological patterns. They are echoes of a process moving from the unseen into the seen. And the reason Archangel Michael is named here is because this is not just about comfort or reassurance. It is about enforcement, about alignment, about ensuring that what was held back without permission can no longer remain withheld. The phrase "a loved one has been flagged" is intentional. This message is not saying you were overlooked. It is saying that heaven used connection. Covenant flows through relationship. Blessings move through lineage, obedience, and spiritual linkage. Someone connected to you did something that created legal standing in the spirit, and that standing is now being honored. This is why the message waiting involves what you're owed. Because entitlement in the divine sense is not arrogance. It is agreement. It is God honoring His own word, His own promises, His own systems of justice. And understand this clearly. This is not about entitlement driven by ego. This is about restoration driven by righteousness. There are things you learn to live without. There are losses you explained away as just life. There are moments you stopped expecting because expecting became too painful. But the records never stopped tracking. Heaven never reclassified your loss as acceptable. And now, as this state is marked, the message waiting is not vague encouragement. It is instruction, confirmation, and release. That is why this opening moment matters so much. If you dismiss this as just another message, you may miss the alignment window it is announcing. Not because God withdraws, but because attention matters. Awareness matters. Agreement matters. Archangel Michael does not confirm messages casually. He confirms them when timing intersects with readiness, when justice intersects with obedience, and when resistance has reached its expiration. January 16th stands as a threshold, not because it is magical, but because it is appointed. And appointments are not flexible in the way people assume. They are met or missed. This message is not here to scare you. It is here to wake you, to tell you that something connected to your life has been reviewed, approved, and activated. That what was owed was never erased. That a loved one's name being flagged was not about them alone. It was about you. As you continue listening, understand this. The reason this feels urgent is because movement has already begun. Files are not flagged at the end of a process. They are flagged at the point of transition. And what comes next will require clarity, not confusion, faith, not fear, attention, not distraction. This opening is not the conclusion, it is the signal. And everything that follows builds on this moment. This message did not find you because you were searching for it. It found you because alignment was already in motion before you ever pressed play. There is a difference between curiosity and calling, and what brought you here today is not curiosity. It is positioning. When a message like this surfaces at the exact moment you are able to hear it, it is because something in you has already been prepared to receive it. Heaven does not waste precision. The timing of this encounter is evidence that you were already standing closer to the answer than you realized. Many people assume that divine messages are broadcast widely and received randomly. But this one is targeted. It reached you because of connection. Connection to a loved one whose name was flagged. Connection to a history you may not fully understand. And connection to a future that is now pressing forward. There are spiritual signals that move through bloodlines, through shared prayers, through covenant relationships. You are not separate from what your loved one carried. You are not isolated from what they believed for, endured, or stood firm in when it would have been easier to walk away. This is why the message did not come through a stranger. It came through a familiar resonance, something that stirred recognition instead of confusion. You may have wondered recently why certain themes keep repeating in your life. Why conversations circle back to fairness, to timing, to unresolved matters. Why you feel both weary and expectant at the same time. But tension is not accidental. It is what happens when preparation meets proximity. You are close enough now that the movement in the unseen is creating pressure in the seen. And pressure, when guided, is not meant to break you. It is meant to move you forward. This message found you because you have already survived the season that disqualified many others. There were moments when your faith was not loud, not confident, not poetic, but it endured. And endurance carries weight in the records. You kept going when clarity was missing. You kept showing up when results were delayed. You learned how to function without answers, and that alone marked you as someone who could be trusted with what comes next. Not everyone who prays is prepared to receive, but you have been prepared through patience, through restraint, and through the quiet decision to keep believing even when belief felt costly. Understand this. Being chosen for a message does not mean you were spared difficulty. It means you were shaped by it. And the shaping is what allows you to recognize truth when it appears. This is why, as you listen, something inside you feels steady instead of alarmed, serious but not panicked, focused but not overwhelmed. That is discernment responding to confirmation. There is also a responsibility tied to this moment. Messages that involve what is owed are not meant to be hoarded or hidden. They are meant to be witnessed. Agreement strengthens release. When you acknowledge what is happening, when you give attention to it instead of dismissing it, you participate in the unfolding. This is why engagement matters more than people realize. Not as a routine action, but as a form of alignment. When you interact, when you respond, when you add your voice, even silently, you are saying, I am present for this. If this message resonates with you, take a moment right now to affirm that alignment. Like this video so the signal is strengthened. Subscribe so you remain connected as this unfolds. Share this message with someone who may be connected to you in ways you don't yet understand. And leave a comment, not because words are required, but because acknowledgement creates witness. These actions are not about a platform. They are about participation. They are about choosing not to let this moment pass unnoticed. You were not late to this message. You were on time. And timing is everything when movement begins. There are people who will hear about what is coming after it has already arrived. You are hearing about it while it is still approaching. The difference matters. It gives you space to prepare your thoughts, your expectations, your posture. It allows you to receive without shock, without scrambling, without disbelief. This message found you because you are connected to a story that is still being written. A story that did not end where you thought it would. A story where delay was not the conclusion, and silence was not the verdict. You are here because awareness is now required. Because the next steps will make more sense if you understand the context now. Because when confirmation arrives, it will not feel foreign. It will feel familiar. And as we move forward, remember this. You are not being informed to entertain you. You are being informed to prepare you. What comes next will add clarity to what has already been set in motion. And you will recognize it, not because someone tells you to, but because something within you already knows. When the word flagged is used, it is not symbolic language meant to sound dramatic. It is administrative language. It is the kind of word used when something requires immediate review, when a status changes, when attention is formally redirected. In the unseen realm, nothing is chaotic and nothing is accidental. Records are not emotional, they are exact. So when a loved one's name is flagged, it means a condition has been met. It means a threshold has been crossed. It means something that was once marked pending has now been moved into a different category entirely. Many people imagine spiritual records as poetic or abstract, but they function more like legal documents. They track agreements, obedience, sacrifice, and timing. They register actions and intentions, not just outcomes. And sometimes, a name is flagged not because something new happened, but because enough time has passed for justice to be enforced. There are prayers that cannot be answered immediately because answering them too early would disrupt a larger process. There are blessings that cannot be released until resistance loses its authority. A flag appears when that authority expires. This is why the involvement of a loved one matters so deeply. The action that triggered this moment may not have been dramatic. It may not have been public. It could have been a quiet decision made under pressure, a choice to remain faithful when compromise would have been easier, a prayer spoken once and never repeated. But that action carried weight, and weight accumulates. When the measure is full, the system responds. You may ask why you are hearing about this now, rather than at the moment the flag was placed. The answer is simple. Information follows activation. Before something moves, silence is often necessary. But once movement begins, awareness becomes essential. You are being informed because what comes next will intersect with your decisions, your perception, and your readiness. Ignorance would no longer protect you. It would only delay your ability to respond. A flag in the records does not mean everything resolves instantly. It means review turns into action. It means what was overlooked by people is now addressed by order. It means the waiting period has shifted from endurance to expectancy. And this is where many people struggle, because expectancy requires a different posture than survival. Survival teaches you to brace. Expectancy asks you to open your hands. There are individuals who lived their entire lives without seeing what was promised to them, but their obedience ensured that someone else would. This is not loss, it is legacy. And if you are listening to this message, you are connected to such a legacy. You are standing at the point where someone else's faith intersects with your present reality. That is not pressure, it is privilege. Do not misunderstand this moment as random favor. It is structured response. And structured response requires awareness. The reason confusion often arises at turning points is because people are still thinking like survivors when they are being asked to think like receivers. What you are owed may not arrive in the form you imagined, but it will arrive in the form that restores balance. Justice does not always look like reward. Sometimes it looks like release. Sometimes it looks like clarity. Sometimes it looks like access you were denied before. This is also why patience is still required, even now. A flag does not mean chaos follows. It means order is restored, and order moves deliberately. You may notice small shifts first: conversations, opportunities, insights. Do not dismiss them. They are indicators that the system is responding. Large changes often begin with subtle confirmations. As you listen, allow yourself to adjust your expectations. Not downward but deeper. What is coming is not fragile. It does not require you to force it into existence. It requires you to recognize it when it appears. That recognition is already forming in you. That calm certainty you feel is not imagination. It is alignment. And here is where attention becomes critical. Moments like this do not repeat often. They are not meant to be rushed through or consumed casually. What comes next builds on what you are understanding now. You will be glad you stayed present for what is about to be revealed, because the clarity that follows will answer questions you have carried longer than you admit. Before moving forward, there is something important to share with you. As I speak this, I feel the weight of souls who are waiting to hear what you are hearing right now. I am saying this to you directly. When you choose to support this work, you are not funding a channel. You are helping light reach those still in the dark. Scripture says the sower releases seed and heaven brings the increase, and this is that moment of sowing. God is saying to you, what you place in my hand, I will multiply back into lives. If this message stirred you, respond prophetically now through Super Thanks, membership, or PayPal. The links are in the description, and the PayPal QR code appears on screen. This is not automation. It is obedience in motion. I bless every seed released here to return as harvest, clarity, and divine acceleration. Act now, and let your obedience speak. When Archangel Michael steps forward in a message like this, it is never symbolic and never casual. His presence signals escalation. Not panic, not fear, but authority, being applied where delay has overstayed its permission. Michael does not appear for comfort alone. He appears when something must be enforced, defended, or restored according to divine order. That is why his confirmation carries weight. It is the difference between hope and execution, between promise and fulfillment. Throughout spiritual history, Michael is known as the defender of God's people and the enforcer of what has already been decreed. He does not negotiate with resistance, he removes it. He does not argue with obstruction, he overrides it. So when this message is confirmed through him, it is because what you are connected to required intervention at a level beyond encouragement. Something stood in the way for too long. Something questioned timing that was already settled. And now, authority has been assigned to resolve it. This also explains why the process may have felt unusually heavy in the past. You were not just waiting, you were contending, even if you did not have language for it. There are seasons where progress slows not because nothing is happening, but because something is being contested behind the scenes. Michael's role is not to start battles, it is to finish them. His involvement tells you that whatever was unresolved has reached the end of its argument. You may have sensed moments when things almost broke through, only to stall again. That pattern is common when resistance knows its time is limited. The closer a release comes, the louder opposition becomes, not because it is strong, but because it is desperate. And desperation often disguises itself as confusion, fatigue, or discouragement. This is why clarity is returning now. Confusion cannot survive in the presence of authority. Michael's confirmation also speaks to protection. Not just physical protection, but protection of outcome. What is being released now will not be easily stolen, reversed, or sabotaged. It is being delivered under guard. That matters, because not all blessings arrive safely. Some require defense until they are established. This is why the timing feels deliberate rather than rushed. Speed is not the goal, security is. Another important truth must be understood here. Michael does not move ahead of instruction. He moves because instruction has already been given. That means the decision concerning what you are owed was not just considered, it was finalized. His role is not to debate whether release should happen. His role is to ensure that it does. That distinction changes everything. You are not waiting for approval. You are witnessing enforcement. This also reframes how you view past silence. Silence was not absence. It was preparation. It was restraint until the proper authority was assigned. Sometimes answers are delayed not because they are denied, but because releasing them too early would expose them to unnecessary conflict. Now that risk has passed, the atmosphere has shifted, and you are feeling it, even if you cannot yet articulate it. There is also a personal aspect to Michael's involvement that many overlook. It is associated with courage, not the loud kind, but the steady kind that holds ground without needing validation. You have been required to develop that kind of courage. The courage to continue without applause. The courage to believe without reassurance. The courage to remain consistent when inconsistency around you would have been easier. That courage was not wasted. It was preparation to carry what comes next responsibly. What is being restored or released will require wisdom to steward it. That is another reason enforcement comes now. Protection is not only about keeping harm out. It is about ensuring readiness within. You are not receiving something fragile. You are receiving something weighty. And weighty things require stability. The season that stretched you was also the season that strengthened you. As this unfolds, do not look for dramatic signs to validate it. Authority often moves quietly. The loudest confirmations are usually internal, a sense of peace replacing tension, clarity replacing uncertainty, resolve replacing hesitation. These are not emotional fluctuations. They are indicators that alignment has occurred. Trust that shift. It is more reliable than spectacle. Michael, stepping forward also means you are not required to fight this battle yourself. Many people exhaust themselves trying to defend what they were never meant to protect alone. This is not your role. Your role is to remain attentive, responsive, and grounded. Enforcement is not your assignment. Agreement is. And agreement is powerful when authority is already engaged. As we move forward, keep this in mind. The presence of Archangel Michael in this message is not meant to intimidate you. It is meant to reassure you. What is happening is orderly, is authorized, and it is protected. You are not stepping into uncertainty. You are stepping into resolution. What comes next will clarify what enforcement looks like in real terms, how it manifests, how you recognize it, and how you respond without fear or confusion. The foundation has been laid, authority had been assigned, and the process is no longer theoretical, it is active. There is a quiet lie that settles into people over time, especially those who have waited longer than expected. The lie says that if something has not arrived yet, it must have been erased. That if years have passed, the record must be outdated. That if life moved on, heaven must have moved on too. But that assumption is not how divine order works. What you are owed was never forgotten. It was never misplaced, downgraded, or reassigned. It remained exactly where it was meant to be, reserved, preserved, and protected until the moment you could receive it without losing yourself in the process. Loss has a way of training people to lower their expectations. You learn to survive without answers. You adapt to missing pieces. You tell yourself that some things just do not work out. But adaptation is not agreement, and survival is not settlement. You may have learned how to function without what was promised, but heaven never agreed that you should have to. What you called making peace, heaven recorded as endurance. And endurance does not cancel inheritance. It qualifies it. What you are owed may not be a single object, event, or outcome. It may be a restoration of balance, a correction of trajectory, an opening that should have happened earlier but was blocked. Sometimes what is owed is not about compensation for pain, but about realignment with purpose. Delays distort direction. They cause detours that were never meant to be permanent. And when those detours last too long, they begin to feel like destinations. This is where confusion often sets in. You start to wonder whether the path you're on is the one you were meant to take at all. But the records know the difference between detour and destiny. They track divergence, not to punish it, but to correct it. And when correction comes, it does not shame you for where you've been. It simply redirects you to where you were always meant to go. That is part of what restoration looks like. Not erasing the past, but redeeming it. You may also need to release the idea that what you're owed must arrive dramatically to be real. Some of the most significant restorations arrive quietly, reshaping your life from the inside out. A decision that suddenly feels clear. A door that opens without resistance. A burden that lifts without explanation. These are not coincidences. They are indicators that balance is being restored. Justice is not always loud, but it is always precise. Another important truth: being owed something does not mean it was taken maliciously. Sometimes it was withheld for protection. There are seasons where receiving too early would have cost you more than waiting. You may not have had the capacity, the discernment, or the stability at the time. And rather than allowing a blessing to become a burden, it was held back. Not as punishment, but as mercy. Now, the conditions have changed. You have changed. And what was once too heavy is now manageable. This reframes the past in a powerful way. It allows you to look back without resentment and forward without fear. You are no longer asking, "Why didn't this happen then?" You are beginning to understand, "This is why it happens now." Timing is not just about opportunity, it is about readiness. And readiness is not measured by desire, but by formation. There are also emotional debts that have gone unpaid for too long. Apologies never spoken. Truths never acknowledged. Efforts never recognized. While not every emotional debt is repaid through human action, none of them go unnoticed in the records. And sometimes, repayment comes not through people changing but through you being released from the weight of waiting for them to. Freedom is a form of restoration too. Closure does not always arrive with explanation. Sometimes it arrives with peace. You may notice that as this message unfolds, something in you feels lighter, even before anything changes externally. That is not imagination. That is alignment returning. When expectation is restored, tension eases. When hope becomes reasonable again, the body responds. Your system recognizes that it no longer has to brace for disappointment. Alone is a form of healing. Understand this clearly. What you are owed is not fragile. It does not disappear because time passed. It does not expire because circumstances change. The value of what was promised is not reduced by delay. If anything, delay increases significance because it proves that the promise was not dependent on conditions. It survived uncertainty, opposition, and silence. And anything that survives all three carries weight. As we move forward, you will begin to see how this restoration takes shape. Not all at once, and not without wisdom, but steadily, purposefully, in a way that does not overwhelm you, but affirms you. You are not reclaiming something that slipped away. You are receiving something that was held for you. And that distinction changes everything. There is a reason this message keeps returning to the phrase "a loved one," not as a vague figure, not as a distant symbol, but as a real person whose choices created movement you are now stepping into. Many people assume that spiritual shifts happen in isolation, as if every breakthrough must be earned alone. But that is not how covenant works. Covenant moves through relationship, through family, through connection. And sometimes, the greatest turning points in your life are unlocked by someone else's obedience, endurance, or intercession long before you ever knew it was happening. This loved one may still be present in your life, or they may belong to your past. They may be someone you admired, or someone you struggled to understand. They may never have told you what they carry, what they prayed, or what they gave up. But the records know. And the records respond to substance, not visibility. What mattered was not whether their actions were seen, but whether they were sincere. And sincerity leaves a trace that time cannot erase. You need to understand something deeply here. Their role was not accidental, and neither is yours. There are moments when one person's obedience is meant to benefit another. Not because it is unfair, but because it is strategic. God often uses relational bridges to move blessing, wisdom, and restoration where they are needed most. And sometimes, the person who builds the bridge never crosses it themselves, but someone they love does. That does not make their effort incomplete. It makes it complete in a different way. This loved one did something that required trust without guarantee. They acted without proof that they would ever see the outcome. They chose faith over certainty. And that kind of decision creates spiritual leverage. It establishes standing. It gives permission for future release. Their action did not expire when the moment passed. It remained active, waiting for the right intersection of timing and readiness. You may wonder why you were chosen to receive the benefit of that action. The answer is not favoritism. It is alignment. You are positioned to carry what they initiated. You have the temperament, the resilience, and the awareness to steward what comes next. That is not coincidence. It is continuity. You are not starting something new. You are continuing something unfinished. This also explains why your journey has felt heavier at times than those around you. You were carrying more than just your own process. You were unknowingly connected to an outcome that required preparation. Pressure without explanation is often a sign of inherited responsibility. But inherited responsibility is not a burden when it is understood. It becomes purpose when clarity arrives. There may have been moments when you felt compelled to make choices you could not fully explain. To walk away from paths that looked promising. To stay faithful when compromise would have been rewarded. To hold your integrity when cutting corners would have made life easier. Those decisions were not random acts of discipline. They were confirmations that you were aligned with something larger than yourself. You were staying compatible with what was coming. This loved one's role also reframes your past struggles. What felt like unnecessary hardship now carries meaning. What felt like delay now reveals design. You were not being withheld from life. You were being protected for it. And the patience that was required of you was not meant to diminish you. It was meant to deepen you. It is important to release any guilt you may feel about benefiting from someone else's sacrifice. That guilt does not honor them. Stewardship does. Living fully, wisely, and purposefully with what is released is the greatest acknowledgement of their contribution. You do not repay legacy by shrinking. You repay it by expending responsibly. You may also begin to notice increased clarity around that loved one as this unfolds. Memories may surface. Conversations may take on new meaning. You may suddenly understand why they said certain things, or why they acted the way they did. This is not nostalgia. It is integration. You are connecting dots that were not meant to be connected until now. As this shift continues, you are not being asked to carry their role. You are being asked to honor it by stepping fully into yours. Your assignment created access. Yours is to move forward with wisdom. Together, these roles complete the picture. Separated by time but united by purpose. And here is the most important truth. The shift is not placing pressure on you to perform. It is releasing permission for you to receive. You are not proving anything. You are aligning with what has already been established. That alignment will feel like relief, not strain. Like clarity, not confusion. Like peace, not urgency. As we move into what comes next, remember this. You are not alone in this story. You never were. What is unfolding now is the result of faith layered upon faith, obedience layered upon obedience. And you are standing at the point where those layers finally meet the present moment. What follows will help you recognize how this shift begins to show itself in practical ways. Subtle at first, but unmistakable. And once you see it, you will understand why this moment could not have come any earlier, and why it could not wait any longer. January 16th is not important because of superstition or coincidence. It is important because of positioning. Certain dates carry weight not because they are extraordinary on a calendar, but because they mark the convergence of readiness and release. This is one of those dates. It represents a turning point, not a dramatic ending, but a deliberate shift. A line you cross without realizing how much has already changed until you look back and see that nothing is the same anymore. Turning points rarely announce themselves loudly. They often arrive quietly, almost unimpressively, disguised as ordinary moments. But beneath the surface, something decisive is taking place. January 16th functions as a threshold. On one side is the season where things were held, delayed, or unresolved. On the other side is the season where movement becomes visible, where answers begin to find form, and where what was once abstract starts to take shape in real ways. This date matters because it signals closure of a cycle. Not just an emotional cycle, but a functional one. Cycles exist to teach, to shape, and to prepare. When their purpose is fulfilled, they do not need to repeat. Many people stay stuck because they misinterpret repetition as permanence. But repetition only lasts until its lesson is complete. January 16th marks the moment when repetition gives way to progression. You may not wake up on this date to immediate fireworks. That is not how turning points usually work. Instead, you may notice subtle but meaningful changes. Resistance that once felt immovable begins to soften. Conversations shift tone. Opportunities appear without strain. Decisions that once felt confusing suddenly feel clear. These are not random improvements. They are signs that you have crossed into a new phase of alignment. One of the most important things to understand about a turning point is that it does not remove responsibility. It changes it. Before, your responsibility was endurance. You had to hold steady, remain faithful, and survive uncertainty. After a turning point, your responsibility becomes awareness. You must notice what is opening. You must recognize what no longer belongs. You must respond to movement rather than brace against delay. This is why this date is being highlighted now, before everything is visible. Awareness prepares you to cooperate rather than resist change. Many people miss their turning points because they are still operating with old expectations. They assume delay is normal, so they overlook momentum when it begins. But you are being told in advance so that you can shift your posture in real time. January 16th also represents a recalibration of timing. You may have felt out of sync before, like your effort did not match your results, or your preparation did not align with opportunity. That misalignment was not your failure. It was timing that had not yet caught up. Now, timing is adjusting. Things that once felt premature will begin to feel appropriate. Things that felt overdue will begin to move. This does not mean everything accelerates instantly. It means everything begins to respond. Response is the first sign of alignment. Silence gives way to feedback. Waiting gives way to interaction. And interaction gives you information you did not have before. That information allows you to make decisions with confidence rather than guesswork. Another reason this date is significant is because it marks the end of unnecessary self-questioning. When cycles repeat, people internalize delay as deficiency. They start to believe something is wrong with them. Turning points break that illusion. They reveal that the issue was never capability. It was timing. And once timing shifts, self-doubt loses its grip. You may notice a renewed sense of energy after this point. Not frantic energy, but steady motivation. The kind that comes from knowing effort will now produce response. That kind of energy is sustainable. It does not burn you out because it is fueled by progress rather than pressure. It is also important to note that turning points do not require you to announce them to everyone. This is not a season for explanation. It is a season for observation. Let changes reveal themselves naturally. Let alignment speak for itself. You do not need validation for what is unfolding. Confirmation will come through consistency, not applause. January 16th is not about forcing outcomes. It is about recognizing permission. Permission to expect again. Permission to play again. Permission to believe that movement is no longer theoretical. That permission alone changes how you walk forward. You stop hesitating. You stop apologizing for wanting more. You stop bracing for disappointment before anything has even happened. As this turning point takes effect, you may feel both excitement and caution. That is normal. It means you care about what is coming. Do not let caution turn into hesitation. Let it turn into wisdom. Move forward attentively, not fearfully. This date stands as a marker, not because everything changes in a moment, but because the direction does. And direction matters more than speed. Once direction shifts, progress becomes inevitable. What comes next will help you recognize the specific ways this turning point begins to communicate with you. Through signs, through messages, through inner clarity. And when that happens, you will understand that January 16th was not just another day. It was the moment the path finally turned forward. When it is said that a message is waiting, it does not mean a random sign floating in the air or a vague feeling you have to interpret through anxiety. It means something specific has already been prepared to meet you. Messages that wait are intentional. They are not rushed, and they are not improvised. They are held until the recipient is ready to receive them without distortion. And readiness is not about perfection. It is about clarity. This message is not coming to confuse you. It is coming to confirm you. It carries information that brings alignment, not fear. And the reason it could not be delivered earlier is because you were still asking the wrong questions. You were asking when the real question was how. How will this integrate into your life? How will this change your direction? How will this require you to see yourself differently? And now, those questions are no longer intimidating. They are timely. A message waiting often arrives in layers. Rarely does it come as one dramatic announcement. Instead, it unfolds through recognition. Something you hear suddenly lands differently. A thought you have had before suddenly carries weight. A conversation confirms what you have been sensing internally. These are not coincidences. They are confirmations stacking on top of each other, building certainty without pressure. You may be tempted to look outward for something extraordinary, but the first sign is usually internal. A calm certainty replaces restlessness. You stop rehearsing worst-case scenarios. You stop questioning whether you missed your chance. That mental shift is not self-talk. It is alignment. It is the mind catching up with what has already been settled. This message also carries instruction. Not instruction that overwhelms you, but instruction that simplifies. It clarifies what matters now and what no longer requires your energy. One of the greatest releases you will experience is realizing that some battles are simply over. You do not need to keep fighting what has already been resolved. You only need to stop reopening it. There is also protection in how this message arrives. It will not expose you prematurely. It will not demand explanations you are not ready to give. It will meet you where you are and guide you forward step by step. That is why impatience is unnecessary. What is waiting for you is not running away. It is positioned to meet you at the right moment. Be attentive to subtle confirmations in the coming days. Repetition is a language. When the same idea, phrase, or opportunity appears more than once, pay attention. Not everything repeated is important, but everything important will be repeated. That is how clarity establishes itself. It is also important to understand that ignoring a message does not cancel it, but it can delay your experience of it. Awareness accelerates integration. Resistance slows it down. This is not about fear of missing out. It is about participation. You are not being tested. You are being invited. As you listen right now, something in you is already responding. That response matters. It is the difference between observing and engaging. And engagement deepens understanding. You are closer than you think, not to an answer, but to alignment. Hold this awareness gently. You do not need to rush or force anything. The message waiting for you is not fragile. It does not disappear because you pause to breathe, but it does require your attention, and the clarity that comes next will make sense of why everything unfolded the way it did. Stay with this moment. What follows builds on what you are understanding now, and you will be glad you remain present for what is about to be revealed. I want to speak to you directly for a moment, because what is unfolding here is bigger than one message or one voice. I am inviting you, yes, you, to help carry this light further. When you sow into this work through Super Thanks, membership, or PayPal, you are placing seed into living ground, and God is saying, I will cause rivers to flow where there was dryness. This is not about support out of obligation. It is about obedience at the right moment. The PayPal link is in the description, and the QR code is visible now. Act while the prompting is fresh. I speak blessing over every giver, clarity, acceleration, and open doors. Respond now, and let your seed speak louder than words. Type I receive the message in the comments if you feel this confirmation. Blessing code 618 is now activated. When something shifts in the unseen, there is always a corresponding response required in the seen. Not because the outcome depends on effort, but because alignment depends on participation. What is unfolding around you now does not demand panic, performance, or pressure, but it does require response. Silence is no longer neutral. In earlier seasons, waiting quietly was appropriate. In this season, awareness must turn into action, even if that action feels small. Your required response is not about doing more. It is about doing differently. It begins internally, with agreement. Agreement is not loud declaration. It is settled acceptance. It is the decision to stop questioning whether this applies to you. The moment you stop disqualifying yourself, alignment strengthens. Many delays persist simply because people remain undecided. Indecision keeps doors half open. Agreement opens them fully. Another part of your response is discernment. Not everything that moves deserves your attention. As momentum increases, distractions often increase with it. Old habits may try to reassert themselves. Familiar doubts may resurface. This does not mean something is wrong. It means relevance has shifted. What once held your focus may no longer deserve it. Discernment helps you redirect energy toward what is emerging instead of what is fading. There is also a practical aspect to your response. Be attentive to invitations, conversations, and opportunities that feel unexpectedly aligned. Not everything that is aligned feels dramatic. Some of the most important shifts begin with simple steps: a message returned, a decision made, a boundary honored. Do not underestimate the power of small, timely actions. Movement responds to motion. Your response also includes releasing old narratives. Stories you told yourself to survive may no longer serve you now that survival is no longer the assignment. You do not need to explain why things took so long. You do not need to justify why you are ready now. You do not need permission to step forward. Carrying old explanations into a new season only adds unnecessary weight. It is important to understand that responding does not mean rushing. Urgency and haste are not the same thing. Urgency is awareness that timing matters. Haste is fear that something will be lost if you do not act immediately. What is unfolding will not vanish if you pause to breathe, but it will not engage fully if you remain passive. Balance is key. There may also be conversations you need to have, or conversations you need to stop having. Response sometimes means silence where you once over-explained. It sometimes means clarity where you once avoided it. Trust that you will know what is required when the moment arrives. You are not expected to plan everything now. You are expected to stay attentive. One of the most powerful responses you can offer is witness. When you acknowledge what is happening, you strengthen its presence in your life. This is why shared testimony matters, not as performance but as confirmation. When you speak alignment, you reinforce it. When you recognize movement, you invite continuation. If this message resonates with you, this is the moment to respond visibly. Like this video so the alignment signal is strengthened. Subscribe so you remain connected as this unfolds further. Share this message with someone who may need this confirmation at the right time. And leave a comment, not out of habit, but as acknowledgement that you are present for this season. These actions are not about attention. They are about agreement. Your response also includes patience with yourself. You do not need to become someone else to receive what is coming. You are not late. You are not behind. You are exactly where readiness meets opportunity. Trust that. Let go of the pressure to catch up. There is nothing to catch up to. You have arrived at the right moment. As this continues, you may notice a desire to organize, to simplify, to make space. Honor that instinct. It is preparation, not restlessness. Clearing space is a response to. It signals readiness to receive without clutter. Do not resist the urge to create room, internally or externally. And remember this, response is ongoing. It is not a single decision made once. It is a posture you maintain. Stay open. Stay observant. Stay grounded. What is unfolding does not require perfection. It requires presence. Hold on to this awareness as we move forward, because what comes next will test not your faith, but your focus. And if you remain attentive, you will recognize the next confirmation when it appears, not because someone announces it, but because it feels unmistakably right. Whenever movement begins, opposition rarely announces itself as opposition. It does not arrive wearing a label that says resistance. Instead, it disguises itself as distraction, fatigue, doubt, or delay that feels familiar enough to ignore. This is important to understand, because the season you are entering is not one where opposition disappears. It is one where opposition loses authority. And when authority is lost, distraction becomes the primary tactic. You may notice that just as clarity increases, your attention is pulled in multiple directions. Thoughts that once stayed quiet may suddenly grow louder. Old worries may resurface without clear reason. Tasks that were manageable may begin to feel heavier than they should. This is not coincidence. It is a response to momentum. When progress becomes inevitable, distraction attempts to slow perception rather than stop movement. The goal of opposition now is not to undo what has been set in motion. It is to exhaust you mentally so that you disengage emotionally. Fatigue is one of the most effective tools against awareness. When people are tired, they stop paying attention. When they stop paying attention, they miss confirmations. And when confirmations are missed, confidence weakens. This is why rest and focus are not luxuries in this season. They are necessities. You may also encounter subtle discouragement disguised as realism. Thoughts like "don't get your hopes up," "were you thought this before," or "just wait and see." These thoughts are not wisdom. They are residue from previous seasons of delay. They once helped you cope. Now, they only hinder you. Recognize them for what they are: outdated survival mechanisms trying to operate in a season of alignment. Another form of distraction may come through people, not intentionally, and not maliciously, but through misplaced urgency. Others may subtly need your attention. Old dynamics may resurface. Situations you thought were resolved may reappear. This does not mean you made a wrong step forward. It means relevance is shifting, and old patterns are testing whether they still have access to you. It is important not to overreact to these moments. Opposition thrives on emotional response. Calm observation weakens it. When you feel pulled, pause. When you feel pressured, breathe. You are not required to resolve everything at once. You are required to remain centered. Centered people are difficult to distract. You may also experience moments of internal questioning, not about belief, but about wordiness. Thoughts like why now? Or why me? These questions are natural, but they are not meant to be answered through analysis. They are meant to be released through acceptance. Worthiness is not measured by timeline. It is established by alignment. And alignment is already present. Do not interpret resistance as a sign you are doing something wrong. Often, it is confirmation that you are doing something right. When nothing changes, there is nothing to resist. When direction shifts, friction appears. Friction is not failure, it is feedback. And feedback helps you adjust without retreating. There is also a temptation in this season to over-explain yourself, to justify your focus, to seek validation for your decisions. This is another subtle distraction. You do not owe everyone an explanation for growth. Silence can be a form of wisdom. Let consistency speak for you. Let time confirm what words cannot. Be especially mindful of how you speak to yourself now. Internal dialogue shapes perception. If you narrate this season with caution alone, you will miss joy. If you narrate it with fear, you will miss peace. Choose language that reflects trust rather than tension. You are not walking into uncertainty, you are walking into resolution. Opposition also loses strength when you refuse to personalize every delay or inconvenience. Not everything that slows you down is meant to stop you. Some pauses are simply moments of recalibration. Do not rush to label them as setbacks. Ask instead what they are teaching you about pacing, priority, or focus. As this unfolds, keep your routine simple. Complexity feeds distraction. Simplicity preserves clarity. You do not need to overhaul your life overnight. You need to stay present. Presence is the greatest defense against distraction. Remember, you are not being tested to see if you are strong enough. You are being positioned to see if you are attentive enough. Strength carried you through survival. Attention will carry you through alignment. And here is the reassurance you need. Distraction cannot undo what has already been authorized. It can only delay your enjoyment of it. You are not in danger of losing what is coming. You are simply being reminded to stay awake as it approaches. What follows next will help you recognize how release begins to manifest, often quietly, often unexpectedly, but always purposefully. And when it does, you will understand why focus mattered more than force, and awareness mattered more than effort. One of the most difficult things for people to believe is that movement can begin before evidence appears. We are trained to trust what we can see, measure, and explain. But release does not start in visibility, it starts in alignment. And alignment has already occurred. That is why this season feels different. Not louder, not chaotic, but quietly certain. Something has shifted beneath the surface, and even if nothing external has fully changed yet, momentum is already at work. Release rarely announces itself with instant transformation. More often, it begins with responsiveness. Doors that once felt sealed begin to open slightly. Conversations that went nowhere suddenly move forward. Delays shorten. Resistance softens. You may notice that things require less effort than they used to. That is not because you are trying harder. It is because friction is decreasing. The system is responding. This is where many people make a mistake. They assume that because everything has not arrived yet, nothing is happening. But arrival is the final stage, not the first. Motion begins with preparation, not presentation. Think of it this way. When a decision is approved, the paperwork moves before the result appears. What you are experiencing now is the paperwork phase. It is not exciting to the eye, but it is critical to the outcome. You may also notice a change in your emotional baseline. Less anxiety, less urgency, less need to control outcomes. That emotional steadiness is not detachment. It is confidence forming. Confidence does not always feel like excitement. Often, it feels like calm. That calm is a sign that you are no longer bracing for disappointment. You are beginning to trust the process again, even if you cannot yet explain why. Another sign of motion is unexpected confirmation. Someone reaches out at the right time. Information appears without searching. An idea aligns perfectly with a need you had not articulated yet. These moments are not random. They are indicators that pieces are being positioned. Pay attention to them. Not obsessively, but appreciatively. Recognition strengthens alignment. It is also important to understand that release does not always look like addition. Sometimes it looks like removal. Things that once drained you may fall away. Obligations may lose urgency. Attachments may loosen. This is not loss. It is clearing. Release makes room, and room is necessary for what is coming. Do not cling to what is exiting. Thank it for its role and allow it to go. You may feel an internal pull toward simplicity, a desire to streamline, to focus, to reduce noise. That is not avoidance. It is preparation. When movement accelerates, clarity becomes essential. You are being guided to reduce distraction before expansion. That order matters. Expansion without clarity leads to overwhelm. Clarity before expansion leads to stability. Another sign that release is in motion is timing adjustment. You may notice that things begin to line up more naturally. Less forcing, less chasing, more alignment. This does not mean effort disappears. It means effort becomes effective. You are no longer pushing against resistance. You are moving with direction. Be patient with the unfolding. Impatience often comes from familiarity with delay, not from lack of faith. You waited a long time, and waiting trains the mind to expect more waiting. Gently remind yourself that the season has changed. You do not need to rush to prove that it has. Let consistency show you. It is also important not to compare your process with others. Release is customized. What aligns for you may not look like what aligns for someone else. Comparison creates confusion and pressure. Stay focused on your indicators. They are specific to your path. You may be tempted to revisit old fears as a way to protect yourself. Resist that urge. Protection now comes from awareness, not avoidance. You do not need to prepare for disappointment anymore. You need to stay present for progress. The release already in motion will not overwhelm you. It will integrate gradually, allowing you to adjust as it unfolds. This is intentional. Sudden change without integration can destabilize even good outcomes. What is happening now is measured, not rushed. That is a sign of care. Trust what you are sensing. Trust the calm. Trust the subtle confirmations. They are not imaginary. They are the early signs of alignment becoming visible. You are not standing on the edge of something uncertain. You are standing inside a process that has already begun to move in your favor. And as this continues, the final piece will bring everything together, not just understanding, but assurance. You will not only see what was happening, you will feel settled in it. And that settlement will mark the true arrival of what you have been waiting for. Everything you have heard up to this moment has been leading here, not to an ending, but to assurance. Assurance is what settles the heart after understanding arrives. It is the quiet confidence that replaces striving. It is the knowing that you are no longer waiting in uncertainty, but standing in alignment. What began as a message about a flagged record has become something deeper, confirmation that nothing connected to your life has been overlooked, wasted, or dismissed. You are not walking away from this message with instructions to fear the future or pressure to perform. You are walking away with peace. And peace is not passive. Peace is evidence that something has been resolved at a level deeper than emotion. It is the sign that resistance no longer has authority to disturb your center. That is the seal being placed now. Think back over everything that was revealed. The loved one whose obedience mattered more than you knew, the timing that finally aligned, the message that waited patiently for you to be ready, the opposition that lost its power, and the release already in motion. None of this is fragmented. It is one continuous story, and you are standing at a point where the story turns from endurance to embodiment. You are no longer carrying questions, you are carrying clarity. This is where many people feel tempted to look backward one last time, to measure how much time was lost or how different things could have been. But there is no value in that now. What matters is not how long it took, but how intact you remained. You are here without bitterness consuming you. You are here without fear defining you. You are here with discernment sharpened and perspective widened. That is not accidental. That is preparation completed. You do not need to announce this season to anyone. You do not need to prove that something has shifted. Let your steadiness speak. Let your peace speak. Let your decisions speak. When alignment is real, it does not require explanation. It simply produces fruit in its time. As you move forward from here, remember this truth. What was owed did not arrive to compensate you for the past, but to equip you for the future. Restoration is not about returning to who you were before the delay. It is about stepping into who you were becoming because of it. You are not resuming an old path. You are continuing a refined one. There will be moments ahead when you realize, quietly and unexpectedly, that something you once worried about no longer has power over you. When you notice that old triggers do not trigger the same response. When you recognize that you are making decisions from clarity instead of fear. These moments are markers. They show you that the seal has taken hold. Hold gratitude in your heart, not as a performance, but as recognition. Gratitude keeps awareness sharp. It keeps you present. It keeps you from slipping back into old survival patterns. You are not surviving anymore. You are stewarding. Before we close, there is one final moment of alignment to step into. As this message settles, I am speaking directly to those who feel the weight of this mission. I am inviting you now to take part in what God is doing through this work. When you give through Super Thanks, membership, or PayPal, you are sowing into open ground, ground that carries light to souls who are still waiting for confirmation. God is saying, release what is in your hand, and I will release what is in mine. This is a prophetic moment, not a casual one. The PayPal link is in the description, and the QR code is on screen. Act now while obedience is calling. I bless every giver with overflow, protection, and divine acceleration. Obey now, and let heaven respond. As we seal this message, receive this final blessing. Type "I walk in divine order" in the comments if this message has aligned your spirit. Blessing code 902 is now activated. May peace guard your mind. May clarity guide your steps. May what is owed arrive with wisdom and remain with purpose. And may you move forward knowing nothing was wasted, nothing was missed, and nothing meant for you will pass you by. This message is sealed.